Welcome, the most captivating science fiction stories where mystery, action, and love intertwine are here. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. The rain hammered Neo Portland streets with the persistence of a debt collector, turning the sidewalks into rivers and making David Chen question his decision to live in a city that apparently existed in a permanent state of meteorological hostility. He fumbled with his apartment building's entrance code, while juggling a bag of groceries that seemed determined to commit suicide by sidewalk impact, cursing the weather, his lack of coordination, and whoever had designed door locks that required the dexterity of a concert pianist to operate. "Come on, you temperamental piece of outdated security technology," he muttered, finally managing to coax the lock into cooperation. "I know it's been a rough century for electronic access systems, but surely we can work together on this basic concept of letting me into my own building." The door opened with a grudging mechanical sigh, and David stepped into the lobby, shaking water off his jacket like a disgruntled cat. The building's interior lighting flickered with the enthusiasm of someone being forced to work overtime, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made even the cheerful potted plants look depressed. It was then that he noticed the figure huddled against his apartment building's inner door. At first glance, she appeared to be a young woman who had made some spectacularly poor weather-related decisions. She wore what looked like formal robes that might have been elegant before they'd been thoroughly defeated by the storm, and her long dark hair clung to her face in wet strands that obscured her features. She was unconscious, curled into a defensive position that spoke of exhaustion and desperation. David's first instinct was to assume she was another victim of the city's growing homeless crisis, but as he approached, he noticed details that didn't quite fit the standard narrative. Her clothes, despite being soaked, were made from materials he didn't recognize, fabrics that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light and maintain their structural integrity despite being thoroughly saturated. More puzzling were the intricate patterns embroidered along the hem and sleeves, symbols that looked like no human writing system he'd ever encountered in his work as a xenolinguistic translator. "Hey," he said softly, crouching down beside her. "Miss, are you okay?" She stirred at the sound of his voice, and when she lifted her head, David felt his breath catch. Her features were striking in their near-perfect symmetry, but it was her ears that confirmed his growing suspicion. Elongated and elegantly pointed, they marked her as definitively non-human. Her eyes opened slowly, revealing irises that shifted between deep green and gold like sunlight filtering through forest leaves. For a moment, she stared at him with the confusion of someone trying to remember where they were and how they'd gotten there. She began, her voice carrying musical undertones that suggested vocal cords evolved for more complex communication than simple speech. He said he would return." "Who said they would return?" David asked gently, setting his groceries aside and pulling off his jacket to offer her some warmth. She accepted the jacket gratefully, pulling it around her shoulders like armor against the world's indifference. "My husband, Kine. He brought me here and said. He said he needed to attend to diplomatic matters and would return shortly." Her English was careful and precise, with an accent that spoke of someone who had learned the language through study rather than immersion. David glanced around the empty lobby. "How long have you been waiting?" She was quiet for a moment, her expression suggesting she was performing calculations that weren't entirely mathematical. "3 days, I believe. Perhaps 4. Your planet's rotation cycle is different from what I am accustomed to." 3 days. David felt anger building in his chest like steam in a pressure cooker. "He left you here for 3 days without food or shelter." "He said the delay was temporary," she replied, but there was something in her voice that suggested she was trying to convince herself as much as him. Diplomatic emergencies can be unpredictable. David studied her face, noting the way her eyes avoided direct contact and the defensive set of her shoulders. In his years of working with alien cultural liaisons, He developed an unfortunate expertise in recognizing when someone was being systematically mistreated by people who were supposed to care for them. "What's your name?" he asked. "I am Zara of the Valdrian House of Moonlit Waters," she replied with formal precision, "though I suppose the house designation is less relevant now. I'm David Chen. I live upstairs." He stood up, offering her his hand. "Why don't you come up to my apartment? You can get dry, have something warm to eat, and we can figure out what happened to your husband." Zara stared at his outstretched hand as if it were a complex mathematical equation she couldn't quite solve. "You would invite a stranger into your dwelling. This is normal human behavior." "It's decent human behavior," David said, "which admittedly isn't always the same as normal, but it's what we're going with today." She accepted his hand and allowed him to help her to her feet, though she moved with the careful deliberation of someone whose trust had been recently and thoroughly shattered. "You are not concerned that I might be dangerous?" "Are you dangerous?" Zara considered the question seriously. "I am proficient in 17 forms of Valdrian diplomatic combat, trained in the art of political negotiation, and capable of reciting the complete genealogies of 43 noble houses. I am not, however, inclined toward violence against those who show kindness." "Diplomatic combat sounds terrifying, but I'll take my chances," David said, leading her toward the elevator. "Besides, anyone who's been abandoned in a rainstorm for 3 days deserves better than standing guard duty in a lobby that hasn't been updated since the 2350s. The elevator ride to the 15th floor was conducted in the kind of awkward silence that occurs when two people are trying to process a situation that neither of them had been adequately prepared for by their respective life experiences. David found himself stealing glances at Zara, noting the way she held herself with unconscious dignity despite her bedraggled appearance, while Zara studied the elevator's control panel with the fascination of someone encountering technology that was simultaneously primitive and foreign. "Your building's transportation system," she said finally. "It operates on mechanical principles rather than gravitational manipulation." "Most of our technology is still pretty mechanical," David admitted. "We're working on the gravitational stuff, but it turns out manipulating fundamental forces is harder than the theoretical physicists made it sound. Your species approaches technological development through incremental improvement rather than paradigmatic leaps," Zara observed. "This is refreshingly honest." "We're nothing if not consistently incremental," David agreed, wondering if that was a compliment or simply an observation about human limitations. His apartment was a reflection of his profession and personality. Walls lined with bookshelves containing dictionaries and cultural guides for dozens of alien languages. A workstation equipped with translation software that looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts and determination. And a living room that managed to be both cluttered and comfortable in the way that spoke of someone who spent most of his time working alone. "This is where you live," Zara said, looking around with the careful attention of someone cataloging potential escape routes. "This is where I live," David confirmed. "It's not much, but it's home. The bathroom is down that hall if you want to clean up, and I'll see what I can find for you to wear while your clothes dry." Zara nodded gratefully, but didn't move toward the bathroom immediately. Instead, she stood in his living room, taking in the alien nature of human domestic arrangements with the same careful observation she'd given the elevator. "David Chen," she said slowly, as if testing the weight of his name. "You are a translator of languages. Xenolinguistic protocols, specifically," he said, pulling towels from a closet. "I help human businesses communicate with alien trade partners, translate cultural contexts, that sort of thing. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and keeps me surrounded by interesting puzzles." "You study the languages of other worlds," she said, and something in her voice suggested this was significant in ways he didn't understand. "Among other things, Cultural context is often more important than literal translation. Understanding what people mean is usually more valuable than understanding what they say. Zara was quiet for a moment, her expression suggesting she was processing information that had personal relevance beyond simple conversation. And you do this work alone? Mostly. I had a partner for a while, my ex-wife, actually. But she decided that spending your life trying to decode alien cultural nuances was less appealing than I'd made it sound. David realized he was probably oversharing, but something about Zara's careful attention made him want to fill the silence with honesty. Turns out that being passionate about xenolinguistic protocols doesn't automatically make you good at human relationship protocols. Your marriage ended because of professional incompatibility, Zara asked, her tone suggesting this was a concept she found familiar. Among other things, David said, surprised by how easy it was to discuss his divorce with someone he'd known for less than an hour. Rachel wanted someone who came home at reasonable hours. 2 weeks had passed since David had discovered Zara in his building's lobby, and his apartment had transformed from a bachelor's organized chaos into something that resembled a cross-cultural integration center. Zara had adapted to human domestic arrangements with surprising enthusiasm, though her commentary on everyday human customs continued to provide David with equal measures of entertainment and anthropological insight. David, Zara called from the kitchen, where she was conducting what appeared to be a scientific experiment involving his coffee maker. I believe I have identified the fundamental flaw in human food preparation philosophy. Only one fundamental flaw, David replied without looking up from his translation of a Centaurian trade agreement. I'm impressed by your optimism. You have created 17 different devices for heating water, yet none of them optimize for both temperature precision and mineral content preservation, she explained, holding up his French press as if it were evidence in a criminal trial. Your species approaches beverage preparation like a collection of individual problems, rather than a unified system requiring integrated solutions. Zara, it's coffee, not engineering. Coffee is engineering, she said, with the serious tone she reserved for what she considered important cultural corrections. The extraction of optimal flavor compounds from processed plant matter through controlled temperature and pressure application is fundamentally an engineering challenge. David saved his work and turned to watch her methodically adjust the coffee grinder's settings with the precision of someone calibrating scientific equipment. Over the past weeks, he discovered that Zara approached everything, from learning to operate his dishwasher to understanding human social customs, with the same analytical thoroughness. It was simultaneously endearing and mildly terrifying. Mercury, he called to his AI assistant, add comprehensive beverage engineering system to my shopping list. David, I feel I should point out that your growing tendency to accommodate your houseguests' optimization suggestions is displaying patterns consistent with domestic partnership behavior. Mercury replied with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. Mercury, we've discussed your inappropriate analysis of my personal relationships. I'm merely noting statistical correlations. For instance, you've reorganized your workspace to include a second chair, modified your meal scheduling to accommodate shared eating times, and yesterday I observed you researching Valdrian cultural preferences for recreational activities. David felt heat rising in his cheeks. That was professional research. Understanding cultural context is part of my job. Indeed. And the fact that this research coincided with your decision to purchase tickets to the Neo-Portland Xenocultural Festival is purely coincidental. From the kitchen came the sound of barely suppressed laughter. Zara had developed an unfortunate appreciation for Mercury's commentary on David's behavioral patterns, and the two of them had formed what could only be described as a conspiracy of amusement at his expense. Your AI assistant has a point, Zara said, emerging from the kitchen with two perfectly prepared cups of coffee. Your behavior toward me has been remarkably accommodating for someone who claims to be merely providing temporary assistance. I'm being a good host, David said, accepting the coffee and trying not to notice how her fingers brushed against his when she handed him the cup. Valdrian hospitality protocols suggest that guest accommodation typically lasts no more than 7 days, Zara replied, settling into the chair she'd claimed as her own. The chair that Mercury had pointedly noted was positioned at an optimal distance for comfortable conversation. After which point, continued cohabitation implies either formal friendship agreements or romantic intention. David nearly choked on his coffee. Romantic intention. Among my people, yes. Though I am beginning to understand that human relationship classifications are considerably more complex and apparently less clearly defined. How so? Zara pulled out a tablet where she'd been taking notes, a habit that David found both charming and slightly unnerving. I have been studying your entertainment transmissions and consulting with Mrs. Patterson regarding human courtship rituals. Oh no, David groaned. Please tell me you haven't been getting relationship advice from Mrs. Patterson. She has been most instructive. According to her research, which apparently involves extensive analysis of something called romantic comedies, human courtship involves a complex series of indirect communications, artificial obstacles, and what she terms sexual tension building through domestic proximity. David buried his face in his hands. Mrs. Patterson watches too many old movies and has too much free time. She also provided me with a comprehensive list of indicators that suggest romantic interest. Zara continued with the clinical detachment of someone presenting scientific findings. Shared meals, modification of personal space to accommodate another's presence, protective behavior toward the potential romantic partner, and increased attention to personal grooming. Those are normal human social behaviors. You have prepared breakfast for me every morning for 14 days, rearranged your furniture to create a shared workspace, threatened legal action against my husband on my behalf, and yesterday I noticed you had purchased what Mrs. Patterson refers to as good shampoo. David stared at her, realizing that she had indeed been conducting what amounted to an anthropological study of his behavior. Zara, I am not distressed by these observations, she said quickly. I am simply trying to understand the parameters of our current relationship status according to human customs. What would you like our relationship status to be? The question hung in the air between them like a delicate piece of crystal that might shatter if handled incorrectly. Zara set down her coffee cup with careful precision. David, I must tell you something about Valdrian marriage arrangements that may be relevant to this discussion. I'm listening. Among my people, marriages are contracts negotiated between families for purposes of genetic compatibility, political alliance, or resource consolidation. Love, what you would call romantic attachment, is considered a pleasant but unnecessary addition to these arrangements. David felt something cold settle in his stomach, and your marriage to Kine was arranged when I was 17 years old to strengthen my family's trading relationship with his house. I had met him twice before our wedding ceremony, both times in formal diplomatic settings where personal conversation was discouraged. She paused, looking out his apartment window at the city beyond. I spent 6 years believing that the absence of emotional connection was normal, that marriage was primarily a practical arrangement between compatible individuals. But living here, observing your behavior, listening to Mrs. Patterson's extensive commentary on what she calls real relationships, I am beginning to understand that I may have been settling for considerably less than what is possible between two people. David reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. Zara, what Kine did to you, abandoning you like that, it's not acceptable by anyone's standards, human, Valdrian, or otherwise. I know that now, she said quietly, though I am still processing the implications. What implications? That I spent 6 years in a relationship where I was valued primarily for my genetic lineage and political connections, where my thoughts and preferences were considered irrelevant, where I was treated as an accessory to my husband's ambitions rather than a person with my own goals and desires. David squeezed her hand gently, and now I am living with a man who asks my opinion on his work, who modifies his routine to accommodate my preferences, who becomes angry on my behalf when he learns I have been mistreated. She met his eyes directly, who treats me as if my thoughts and feelings matter. They do matter, more than you know. This is what Mrs. Patterson refers to as the difference between settling and choosing, I believe. David couldn't help but smile. Mrs. Patterson has been surprisingly insightful about your situation. She has also suggested that I am, in her words, clearly smitten with you, and that you are too dense to recognize obvious romantic signals. She said considerably more than that. But I am attempting to maintain some diplomatic discretion regarding her more colorful observations about human male emotional intelligence. David laughed, feeling some of the tension ease from the conversation. So, according to Mrs. Patterson's expert analysis, what should we do about this situation? She recommends what she calls honest communication followed by appropriate romantic gestures. Though she was somewhat vague about what constitutes appropriate romantic gestures in cross-species relationships. Well, David said, still holding her hand, I can start with honest communication. Zara, I care about you. More than I probably should after 2 weeks, more than I've cared about anyone in a long time. I know your situation is complicated, and I know you're still legally married to someone who doesn't deserve you, but I want you to know that whatever happens next, you have a choice. You don't have to settle for relationships that treat you as less than you are. Zara was quiet for a moment, her thumb tracing small circles on his palm. And if I chose to stay here, to build something new rather than return to something that was never truly mine, then I'd like to see. The Valdrian Embassy occupied 3 floors of a gleaming building in Neo-Portland's diplomatic district. Its architecture, a seamless blend of human engineering and alien aesthetics that managed to be both impressive and vaguely intimidating. David stood beside Zara in the embassy's main reception area, trying to project confidence while internally cataloging all the ways this meeting could go catastrophically wrong. You don't have to do this, he said quietly, adjusting his formal jacket for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. We could leave right now, find another approach. David, we have discussed this, Zara replied with the patient tone she developed for his tendency toward protective anxiety. Kine is my legal husband according to Valdrian law. Ignoring his summons would only create additional complications. I still don't like the idea of you facing him alone. I will not be alone, you will be there. As what? I'm not your lawyer, I'm not a diplomat, I'm just. You are the person who chose to help me when I had no one, Zara said firmly. That gives you more standing in this situation than any formal title would provide. Mercury's voice emerged from David's communication device. If I may interject, I have completed my analysis of Valdrian marriage dissolution procedures. The legal framework is complex. Define complex, David said, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Valdrian marriage contracts can only be dissolved through formal release by the husband, mutual agreement with family approval, or successful completion of what is termed a contest of worth. Contest of worth? Zara looked surprised. Mercury, are you certain? That law has not been invoked for over 2 centuries. The legal precedent remains valid according to current Valdrian civil code, though I should note that the contest parameters are unusual by human standards. Before David could ask for clarification, the reception area's doors opened with a soft whisper of advanced hydraulics, and a figure emerged that made David's jaw tighten with instant dislike. Kine of the Valdrian Empire was tall, elegantly dressed, and carried himself with the casual arrogance of someone who had never questioned his right to have the world arrange itself for his convenience. "Zara, my dear," Kine said, approaching with arms outstretched as if greeting a beloved partner rather than the wife he had abandoned on a rainy street 3 weeks earlier. "You look well. Earth's climate appears to agree with you." "Kine." Zara's voice was carefully neutral, though David noticed her shoulders straightening into what he'd learned was her defensive posture. "I received your message." "Yes, I apologize for the delay." The trade negotiations were more complex than anticipated. Kine's gaze flicked to David with mild curiosity. "And you are?" "David Chen. I've been helping Zara while you were delayed." "How thoughtful," Kine replied with the tone of someone acknowledging a minor service. "I trust she wasn't too much trouble." David felt his hands curl into fists. "She wasn't any trouble at all." "Excellent. Zara, collect your things. We have a transport to catch within the hour." "Actually," Zara said quietly, "we need to discuss the terms of my departure." Kine paused, his expression shifting from casual dismissal to mild confusion. "Terms? Zara, what are you talking about?" "I am talking about the fact that you abandoned me for 3 weeks without communication, resources, or explanation. Such behavior may constitute grounds for marriage dissolution under Valdrian law." For the first time since entering the room, Kine looked genuinely surprised. "Zara, don't be dramatic. I was handling important business. Wives are expected to be patient during their husband's professional obligations. Wives are also expected to be informed of their husband's whereabouts and provided with adequate support during extended absences." Zara replied with the precision of someone who had clearly been researching legal precedents. "Your behavior may qualify as abandonment." Kine's pleasant facade cracked slightly. "This is ridiculous. You're my wife. We have obligations to fulfill." "I have obligations to myself as well," Zara said, her voice growing stronger, "including the obligation to be treated with basic respect and consideration." David watched this exchange with growing admiration for Zara's composure and growing irritation with Kine's casual dismissal of her concerns. "Maybe you should listen to what she's trying to tell you." "I'm sorry," Kine said, turning to David with Arctic politeness, "but this is a private matter between husband and wife. Your input is neither requested nor appropriate." "My input became appropriate when you left your wife abandoned and defenseless in a foreign city," David replied evenly. "That's not a private matter, that's criminal negligence." Kine's expression hardened. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate whatever assistance you may have provided to my wife during the recent inconvenience. However, your involvement in this matter ends now. Zara, we are leaving." "No," Zara said simply. The single word seemed to hang in the air like a challenge to the fundamental order of the universe. Kine stared at his wife as if she had suddenly begun speaking in ancient mathematical theorems. "I beg your pardon." "I said no, Kine. I will not simply collect my things and follow you to whatever new assignment requires a decorative wife, not without discussing the terms of our continued marriage." "Terms?" Kine's voice rose slightly. "Zara, we don't negotiate terms. You are my wife. I am your husband. These roles have clearly defined responsibilities." "And what are your responsibilities as my husband?" Zara asked. "Because from my perspective, they appear to include abandoning me when convenient and collecting me when socially necessary." David found himself impressed by Zara's calm delivery of what amounted to a systematic destruction of Kine's assumptions about their relationship. 3 weeks ago, she had been a broken woman convinced that her marriage's emptiness was normal. Now she was facing down her husband with the confidence of someone who had learned her own worth. "This is absurd," Kine said, clearly struggling to regain control of the situation. "Zara, I don't know what ideas this man has put into your head." "David didn't put any ideas into my head," Zara interrupted. "He simply treated me like a person whose thoughts and feelings mattered. The contrast was educational. Kine's gaze shifted between them, his expression growing more hostile as he apparently recognized the nature of their relationship. I see, and what exactly has been the nature of your education? I learned what it feels like to have someone ask my opinion before making decisions that affect me. I learned what it means to have a partner who considers my comfort and preferences. I learned that marriage can be a collaboration rather than a command structure. You learned fairy tales, Kine said dismissively. Zara, this man has filled your head with romantic nonsense that has no bearing on real relationships. Marriage is a practical arrangement. Love is a luxury that few can afford. Maybe, David interjected, but respect isn't a luxury. It's a basic requirement. Mr. Chen, you understand nothing about Valdrian culture or the responsibilities of marriage within our society. I understand that abandoning your wife for 3 weeks without a word isn't acceptable in any culture. Kine turned back to Zara with visible frustration. This discussion is pointless. Zara, you are legally bound to me. Whatever romantic fantasies you may have developed during my absence, they don't change the fundamental reality of our situation. Then perhaps, Zara said quietly, it is time to change that fundamental reality. What are you saying? I am formally invoking the right of contest under Valdrian Civil Code Section 47, subsection 12, Zara announced. I challenge the validity of our marriage contract on grounds of abandonment and request a contest of worth to determine the most suitable arrangement for my future welfare. The reception area fell into complete silence. Kine stared at his wife with an expression of shock that would have been comical under different circumstances. Zara, he said slowly, the right of contest has not been invoked for over 2 centuries. No one remembers the proper procedures. I do, Mercury's voice emerged from David's device. The contest of worth was scheduled to take place 3 days later in a formal chamber within the Valdrian embassy, overseen by a panel of 3 judges. A Valdrian legal scholar, a human relationship counselor, and a Zentorian diplomat who specialized in interspecies mediation. David had spent those 3 days in a state of barely controlled panic, alternating between intensive research into Valdrian cultural expectations and profound questioning of his sanity in agreeing to compete for someone's legal right to choose their own future. You're overthinking this, Zara said, watching him pace around his apartment while muttering about emotional intelligence assessments and cultural sensitivity protocols. The contest is designed to evaluate genuine care and understanding, not performance anxiety. That's easy for you to say, David replied, pausing in his circuit around the living room. You're not about to have your worthiness as a partner judged by a panel of experts, while your competition has 6 years of marriage experience to draw from. 6 years of treating me like decorative furniture, Zara corrected gently. David, you know me better than Kine ever has. You've seen me as a complete person, not just a wife fulfilling expected roles. What if that's not enough? What if the judges decide that legal marriage and cultural familiarity outweigh genuine affection? Zara stood up from her chair and moved to where he stood, taking his hands to stop his nervous fidgeting. Then at least I will have had the chance to choose. David, regardless of what happens today, you have already given me something I never thought possible. What's that? The knowledge that I deserve to be treated with love and respect. Even if the contest doesn't go as we hope, I will never again settle for less than I'm worth. David squeezed her hands, drawing strength from her calm confidence. Okay, let's go prove to some judges that genuine partnership beats legal possession. The contest chamber was arranged like a cross between a courtroom and a therapy session, with comfortable seating for the judges and 2 presentation areas, where David and Kine would be expected to demonstrate their understanding of Zara's needs, preferences, and goals. Kine had arrived dressed in formal diplomatic attire that probably cost more than David's monthly rent, while David had opted for his best professional outfit, and a quiet prayer to any deities who might take an interest in interspecies relationship disputes. Gentlemen, announced Judge Veridian, the Valdrian legal scholar, the contest of worth will proceed in 3 phases. First, you will each present your understanding of Zara's character, needs, and aspirations. Second, you will respond to scenarios designed to test your commitment to her well-being. Finally, Zara herself will be given the opportunity to ask questions that will help determine which arrangement best serves her interests. Kine stepped forward first, his presentation polished and confident. Honored judges, I have been married to Zara for 6 years. During that time, she has fulfilled her duties as a diplomatic wife with grace and competence. She is intelligent, well-educated, and capable of representing our family's interests in social and political settings. As her husband, I have provided her with security, status, and the opportunity to contribute to important diplomatic initiatives. David listened to this recitation with growing discomfort. It sounded less like a description of a person and more like a performance review for an employee. Zara requires structure and clear expectations, Kine continued. She thrives when given specific responsibilities within established parameters. Our marriage has provided her with purposeful work and social standing that align with her capabilities and family background. When it was David's turn, he found himself abandoning the formal presentation he'd prepared. Judges, I've known Zara for less than a month, but in that time I've learned that she's brilliant, curious, and capable of insights that consistently surprise me. She approaches problems with analytical precision, but also with empathy and creativity. She's funny. She makes observations about human behavior that are both accurate and hilarious. She's brave enough to challenge systems that treat her unfairly, and kind enough to worry about how her choices might affect others. He paused, looking directly at Zara. She doesn't need someone to provide her with purpose or structure. She needs someone who recognizes that she already has both. What she deserves is a partner who values her thoughts, who asks for her input, who sees her independence as a strength rather than a problem to be managed. The second phase involved response scenarios. The judges presented situations designed to test each candidate's approach to partnership challenges. Scenario 1, announced Dr. Morrison, the human relationship counselor. Zara has been offered a research position that would require significant travel and time away from home. How would you respond? Kine's answer was immediate and confident. Such a position would be inappropriate for a married woman with family responsibilities. I would decline the offer on her behalf and help her find more suitable work that accommodates our household needs. David felt his stomach clench. I would ask Zara what she wanted to do. If the position interested her and aligned with her goals, I'd want to understand how we could make it work. Her career aspirations are her decision to make. Scenario 2. Zara disagrees with you about a significant decision affecting both your futures. How do you proceed? As the head of household, the final decision would be mine, Kine replied. However, I would certainly consider her input before making my choice. We'd talk about it until we found a solution we both felt good about, David said. Big decisions should be made together, not by one person for both people. The scenarios continued, each one revealing the fundamental differences in how the two men viewed marriage and partnership. Kine spoke about hierarchy, duty, and traditional roles. David talked about collaboration, respect, and shared decision-making. Finally, Judge Sethis, the Zentorian diplomat, invited Zara to address questions to both candidates. Kine, Zara said, her voice steady but serious. In 6 years of marriage, can you tell me what my favorite food is? Kine looked momentarily confused. You've never expressed strong preferences about food. You eat whatever is appropriate for the occasion. David, you love the pasta with mushrooms from that little place on 5th Street, but only when they don't oversalt the sauce. You also have strong opinions about coffee preparation that have revolutionized my morning routine. Zara smiled slightly. Kine, What do I do when I'm anxious or stressed? You perform your duties more quietly than usual. David, you reorganize things. First my bookshelf, then the kitchen cabinets, then whatever project you're working on. It helps you process information and regain a sense of control. Final question, Zara said, her voice becoming softer. What do you believe I want most from a partnership? Kine straightened confidently. Security, status, and the opportunity to contribute to something larger than yourself through our family's diplomatic work. David. David considered the question carefully. I think you want to be seen, really seen, for who you are rather than who you're supposed to be. You want someone who values your mind, your independence, your unique perspective. You want a partnership where you can be completely yourself, without having to perform or accommodate someone else's expectations. The judges conferred for several minutes, while David tried not to interpret their expressions, and Kine maintained his confident demeanor. Finally, Judge Veridian stood to announce their decision. The panel finds that while both candidates demonstrate care for Zara's welfare, their approaches to partnership represent fundamentally different philosophies. Candidate Kine offers traditional security within established cultural frameworks. Candidate David offers collaborative partnership based on mutual respect and individual choice. David held his breath. The panel's decision is based not only on the candidates' presentations, but on our observation of Zara's responses throughout this process. We find that candidate David's approach aligns more closely with Zara's expressed needs and demonstrated preferences. The contest of worth is decided in favor of David Chen. The chamber erupted in a mixture of celebration and protest. Kine immediately began arguing about procedural irregularities and cultural bias, while David found himself swept into Zara's embrace, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. This is not over, Kine declared as security began escorting him from the chamber. I will appeal this decision through proper Valdrian channels. Appeal all you want, Zara called after him. I've made my choice. 6 months later, David and Zara sat in their expanded apartment. David had rented the unit next door and combined them into a space that accommodated both his translation work and Zara's growing consulting practice, helping other alien refugees navigate Earth's legal and social systems. Mrs. Patterson had appointed herself unofficial grandmother to their relationship and provided regular commentary on their progress toward what she considered proper romantic milestones. David, Zara said, looking up from her latest case files, I received an interesting communication today. Oh, the Valdrian embassy wants to hire me as a cultural liaison. Apparently, there's been a significant increase in marriage dissolution requests since our contest, and they need someone who understands both traditional expectations and modern partnership models. David grinned. Are you going to take it? I'm considering it. The irony of Kine's former wife becoming the person who helps other Valdrian women escape unsatisfying marriages is appealing. Justice served with a side of poetic irony. I like it. Zara set aside her work and moved to join him on the couch they'd selected together, a process that had involved extensive debate about optimal seating arrangements and had been the subject of considerable teasing from